Hey, Eric's back with part two of Unit 1 of the online teaching workshop focused on pedagogical design, workload planning for online flipped and hybrid classes. And let's see if I can hide myself. So we were talking about just this kind of comprehensive pedagogical plan, which is comprised of instructor-directed teaching, independent student work, and independent instructor work. And I'm really curious to read the responses that you just gave to the last question, but let's dig a little bit deeper. Where do we start? If you actually want to do this sort of planning for your own class, and I will be asking you to do that, I'm going to offer a suggestion about where to start, and that's in the middle. You could start anywhere, right? Because these are not three independent aspects of a class. Whatever's happening in the instructor-directed teaching will actually help us figure out what we're doing outside of class and will definitely inform what students are doing outside of the class. I also want to say it's not up to you to justify to me what's happening in that center section. It's really for you to justify to yourself so you can explain it to students. You may need to talk to your department chair or lead instructor about it, but as a coach, I'm here to help you define these in a way that will help you be more satisfied and be a better teacher, and that will help your students succeed more. So whether we're talking about online, hybrid, or flipped, I think thinking about that instructor-directed teaching part of the class is probably the best place to start. And let me go out on a limb here. You probably think that that 3 hours a week that you spend with your students live in a face-to-face class is the most important part of the class. After all, if the instructor-directed teaching part is not that important, then students could just be learning on their own by going to Khan Academy or reading a textbook on their own. There's a reason they're coming to college. They're coming to college because we think there's a serious value-added aspect of learning when there's a teacher in the class who has designed a class in a particular way. So, the way we design our classes is really critical. I think it should be thoughtful. And I'm going to self-disclose, until recently, I never really did much thought about this. I just went in and taught for 3 hours a week and, lectured and just kind of winged it. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best strategy for face-to-face classes, but I will definitely tell you if you're teaching an online or a hybrid class, just winging it is probably not going to work, and it's definitely not going to work in a flipped class. So you don't need to tell me. I mean, I'm going to ask you to tell me because as part of this workshop, I'm going to ask you to do this work. I want to learn from you, but it's not about justifying to me. So please feel free. In this activity, you're going to earn the credit for this workshop and get paid regardless of what you do, but I'm hoping that this is really fruitful and that you take it seriously and you reach out to me for help if you get stuck, or you work with colleagues, or you use this as a jumping off point for future further thought throughout this workshop this semester and beyond. I think you need to know for your own satisfaction. My educated, informed hypothesis is that there's a reason why teachers are not as satisfied with flipped online or hybrid classes compared to face-to-face classes. It's because in flipped online and hybrid classes, our identity is a little bit in question. We have to actually be thoughtful about who we are as teachers and define what that is in a particular way. In a face-to-face class, at least many of us, we simply go in and whatever's happening in that face-to-face class, we're up in the front, the students are out there, we think of ourselves as content experts, as content deliverers, to some extent, maybe more than we should. Students definitely are happy in that passive role of sitting there, listening to lectures. Often they're happy if they don't have to do anything for those 45 hours if they just listen. If you're doing something different, students are going to be dissatisfied. They're going to be confused and uncomfortable. There's a reason online students struggle. There's maybe lots of reasons, but one of them is those normal expectations of what that instructor-directed teaching looks like are just thrown out the window because there's no seat to sit in and there's no front of the room to watch the teacher. Whatever teaching is in an online class, it's not the same as a face-to-face class. A hybrid class may be even harder because there's a portion of the class that meets face-to-face, and that teaching may look similar to a traditional face-to-face class. But then there's this online component that's probably a third or a half of the class And there's supposed to be some teaching happening there too. And what does that look like? If you don't know, your students are going to be confused. Or worse, there's not going to be teaching in the online part of the class. And then you're not going to be happy as the teacher because you're only going to get to do half the teaching you normally do. And students are going to be missing out. A flipped class? Wow. You still have 3 hours of FaceTime with students every week, but you're not doing what normal teachers do, right? You're not doing that normal lecture delivery or lecture discussion. You've thrown out the normal expectations of the classroom. You've decided that there is a better way to use that instructor-mediated time. But you've got to bring the students along too. You're going to be doing something different in that FaceTime, which means the students are going to have to do something different. And defining it for yourself so you can explain it to students, critical. So that's what we want to do in this section. Well, what is online teaching? You can pause this if you want to look at some examples. I don't know what online teaching is for you, but I think you need to know for yourself. If you're teaching a hybrid class, what does the online teaching look like? What is that proportional aspect of your hybrid class that's online? What do you do there that you count as teaching? So your students make sure that they know where they should see you in the online part of the class. And what is flipped teaching? Well, I don't know what these boxes would look like. You're going to tell me, and we're going to talk about it. But I just want to make sure I don't have the answer. As a coach, I'll work with you and help you define it for yourself. I certainly have ideas. I can tell you what I think I've seen other people do. But this isn't about me telling you what to do. It's about you being thoughtful, planning your own class so you can be satisfied with that design, and that then you can explain it in a way that makes sense to students so they'll know what to expect. They'll be satisfied and they'll learn. Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to focus on online teaching? Well, one reason is if we focus on that online teaching part, that 3 hours a week in the middle, the other components of the class will just naturally fall into place. So let me talk a little bit about my own class. I'll offer an example. And this is a realistic look at my own online class. I co-teach an online class with Carrie Mitchell. It's Ethics and English 121. It's a totally integrated course, ethics and English integrated together. It's really a 6-credit class. And that might give you some insight into why I've taken this kind of pedagogical planning really seriously. In our class, it's a 6-credit class. Students have a tremendous amount of work to do each week. And so we really found that the only way students can get all that stuff done in a way that works and makes them happy and that makes us happy is that we have to be really directive and make sure students know exactly what they need to do every week, exactly what we're going to be doing every week, what we're going to be doing together, what they're going to be working on their own. I'm going to talk about it as if it's just my class, but I just want to make sure Carrie gets equal credit for the course we designed. So for me as a teacher, as an online teacher, this is what online teaching is. This is what instructor-directed teaching looks like. I spend 2 hours a week posting and replying to discussions. That's what I need as a teacher. I need a place where I can be active each week, reading what students are saying, offering up my own ideas in the form of little mini lectures that are discussion posts, replying to students, capturing the teachable moment, putting them back on track, praising them, correcting their mistakes, building camaraderie, all those kinds of things that I want to do as a teacher each week. That's going to take me 2 hours over the course of the week, posting and replying to the different sorts of discussion assignments that are ongoing in my class every week. I spend an additional hour creating screencasts. I do midweek updates, which give housekeeping and just general tips and goals, reminders. I also do other sorts of feedback to students, individualized feedback and whole class feedback using screencasts and some written feedback. And this is mainly informative stuff, right? So this is the stuff each week that I want to make sure I'm capturing the teachable moment, I'm closing the loop, replying to students on their formative assignments so that they can learn and move forward toward those bigger essays that are coming down the road. So I've defined for myself what online teaching is. And by doing that, I have then defined what the students need to do. What is their role in the instructor-directed teaching? What is their role in this mediated aspect of the class? Well, they need to participate in discussion. If they're not participating in discussion, then I can't participate in discussion. Right? It's a two-way street. I can only do the teaching if they're in there giving me something to work with. I can only capture the teachable moment if they're there to express the teachable moment that I can then read and capture. I can only give them meaningful feedback on the formative assessments that I've put in the class if they do the assessments. So each week they're doing guided thinking activities, a lot like what we're doing in this online teaching workshop. They're in the quiz tool, they're watching videos of me, they're answering questions, they're reading and typing, and they're doing work in the class that then I get to look at and give them feedback right away. And they're also doing things like watching my midweek updates and doing those sorts of things. So this is not the entire class, but this is that instructor-mediated aspect of the class. This is the teaching component. Do you think my students know where to see me in class? They definitely do. They know if they want to get Eric time, they go to discussions. Anytime they want to see me, they can go to open discussion and they're going to see my posts. If they're posting, I'm going to be replying to them. They can reply to one of my replies. I'm going to be in there. Students are, they know that if they go to open discussion, they're going to see me because I've identified that that's how I define my role as an online teacher. They also know that they're going to get feedback from me every week, right? Because I've defined it this way. If they do the work, they're going to get feedback. And I'm not spending 5 hours a week doing this. I'm giving them meaningful, timely feedback, but it, is in a way that's efficient. So, I think this is helpful for a couple of reasons. I identified for myself what I need as a teacher to self-actualize. I can't just do grading. I can't just wait until the end of the week and summarize. I have to be in there live. I need it. And I've designed the class so that students get satisfaction because they get teacher presence and teacher engagement. But clearly, this is only one aspect of the class. In order to make this part work, what do I have to do outside of the class? I have to do the rest of the grading, I have to enter the grades, I have to do more feedback, give them actual feedback on essays and all of that sort of stuff. I have to update the course, I have to make sure the quizzes are working and all of that sort of thing. I have to reply to email, right? Stuff that's critically important, but I'm not counting it as teaching. I'm pretending that this is like a face-to-face class and this is the teaching time and this is the stuff I'm doing outside of class. Really important. It's all important, but I've identified this as teaching. So what else? What does the student need to do? Again, if this is what I'm doing and this is what the student's doing working with me, what's the rest of the stuff? This is only 3 hours a week. What's that other 6 to 9 hours a week that the student's doing? They're doing this kind of stuff. They're doing reading, they're studying, they're taking quizzes to mastery, they're working on essays, they're doing more discussion posts and writing prompts. And this is the pedagogical design for my online class. This is more or less a synopsis of each week. Now what I could do is go through week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 and be more specific, right? What is the actual discussion question we're working on? What's the actual activity we're working on? Which chapter are they looking at? Which quiz are they taking? Which activity are they working on? Which major essay are they drafting a paper for? And that sort of thing. But this is an overall look at the way I've designed my online class, where I've identified instructor-directed teaching, independent student work, and independent instructor work. I'm going to pause. Bring me back for a minute. I just want to let you know I'm still here. I'm going to take a few more minutes. I thought I'd show you another example. So this is a what if. What if this is the way the class works, right? What if that as a teacher, I've designed, this adds up to more than 3 hours a week, so I apologize. I need to check my math. But anyway, it'll work for this example. What if I want to do an hour a week of individualized instruction? Each week I want to spend an hour giving individualized feedback on student essay drafts, work in progress. I want to do an hour a week facilitating peer reviews, and I want to do 45 minutes a week as a live Google Hangout. If that's the way I've defined my teaching, then pretty clearly the student needs to uphold her end of the bargain, right? In order for me to facilitate the peer review, the student has to do the peer review. In order for me to actually give the individualized instruction on the draft, the student has to do the draft, and there's no point in giving the feedback if student isn't reading the feedback and doing something with it. And I can't really count the Google Hangout as teaching time if I'm there by myself, so the student has to be there too. I'm going to hit you with one more example. If we just looked at strictly a face-to-face class, it might look something like this. What's this instructor-directed teaching time? Well, maybe it looks something like this. There's a certain number of minutes of lecture. I'm offering examples and we're working on those. Students are spending 20 minutes a week working problems, answering questions, facilitating group work. So these are all the things I'm doing every week that's here. What's the student doing? Well, they're doing this sort of stuff at home, reading, writing essays, and then what am I doing outside of class? Grading. So I just wanted to offer some different examples of what a comprehensive pedagogical design might look like. And you can bet what I'm going to ask you to do is to try this out on your own. So I'm going to end this section of the video and then give you a chance to do a little thinking and a little work. And then I'll be able to read what you do and capture that teachable moment and give you some feedback.